It happened during a joint training exercise in the Nevada desert. Elite operators from every branch gathered for the classified event. SEALs, Rangers, Marine snipers. When the transport arrived that morning, a small figure stepped out, hood pulled up, face half covered. Nobody knew her name. They called her the Ghost Mascot, whispering jokes about the rookie afraid of the sun. But when the shooting drill began, she stepped to the line. The commander called for an impossible shot, 1,600 meters, crosswind, moving target. When she fired, the range fell silent. The commander approached, his face draining of color, as she pulled back her hood. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories of unsung heroes, please consider subscribing. The Nevada desert stretched out beneath the scorching morning sun, shimmering with heat as a convoy of military transport trucks kicked up dust along the restricted access road. This wasn't just any training ground. It was the place where elite operators proved their worth, where reputations were forged or broken under the unforgiving desert sky. Commander Adric Thorne stood on the makeshift platform, his weathered face betraying little emotion as he watched the final vehicles approach. At 48, Thorne carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen enough combat to know what mattered. His Navy SEAL career had made him a legend among the special operations community, but the silver at his temples and the deep lines around his eyes hinted at the cost of that reputation. "Final transport arriving now, sir," his assistant reported, handing him a clipboard with the day's roster. Thorne scanned the list, his expression darkening slightly when he reached the final name. "Has there been any further communication about our last participant?" "No, sir. Just the directive from command. Observer advisor status only." Thorne handed back the clipboard. "Very well. Let's get this circus started." Below, the assembled operators milled around in loose groupings that reflected their service branches. Navy SEALs clustered near the equipment pallets, their easy confidence bordering on arrogance. Army Rangers stood in disciplined formation nearby, while Force Recon Marines calibrated their gear with methodical precision. The air hummed with competitive energy and specialized jargon, a gathering of predators sizing each other up. Team lead Rafe Mercer approached the commander's position, his confident stride matching his reputation. At 40, Mercer was one of the most decorated SEALs still on active duty, a fact he never allowed anyone to forget. "Commander," Mercer called up, shielding his eyes against the sun. "Heard we're getting some kind of VIP observer. Any intel you can share before they arrive?" Thorne's expression remained neutral. "All participants have been vetted, Mercer. Focus on the exercise parameters." "With respect, sir, my team has been prepping for this. Joint op for months. If someone's being inserted to evaluate us, we deserve to know." The distant rumble of an approaching vehicle saved Thorne from responding. All eyes turned to the battered transport truck, kicking up a plume of dust as it approached the assembly area. It looked older than the other vehicles, lacking military markings. "Civilian contractor," someone muttered, the words spreading through the gathered operators like a contagion. The truck ground to a halt. The driver remained inside as a single passenger door swung open. The figure that emerged was smaller than expected, dressed in dusty fatigues with a hood pulled up despite the heat. A desert scarf covered the lower half of their face, revealing only watchful eyes that scanned the assembly with unsettling intensity. Lachlan Cooper, a 29-year-old Marine sniper with a reputation for by-the-book perfection, stood with his team as the hooded figure collected a worn rucksack and what appeared to be a civilian spotter's kit from the truck. "That's our observer? Looks like someone's kid sister playing soldier." His spotter, Daxton Reed, a cocky 26-year-old SEAL with more attitude than experience, snorted. $10 says she's some general's daughter getting field experience for her resume." Commander Thorne descended from the platform, approaching the newcomer with a formal nod. Their brief conversation was too quiet to overhear, but Thorne's rigid posture suggested tension. He finally turned to address the assembled operators. "Teams, this is your observer advisor for the sniper elements. She'll be rotating between groups throughout the exercise." He deliberately offered no name, no rank, no service branch. "Sniper Team Charlie will integrate her first. Cooper, get her situated." Cooper stepped forward, his expression professionally blank, despite his obvious displeasure. "Yes, Commander." As Thorne walked away, Reed muttered just loud enough to be heard. "Observer advisor, more like ghost mascot, can't even face the sun without hiding under a hood." The hooded figure gave no indication of having heard as she followed Cooper toward the designated team area. The assembled operators dispersed to their stations, but curious glances followed the stranger's progress across the compound. Cooper's team had claimed a section of shade created by one of the transport vehicles. The three-man unit had already arranged their gear with military precision, a stark contrast to the worn, civilian-looking equipment the newcomer carried. "I'm Gunnery Sergeant Cooper. This is Petty Officer Reed and Specialist Torres. We've been operating as a unit for 18 months. Cooper's introduction was clipped, the bare minimum of professional courtesy. The woman nodded once but offered no name in return. She simply set down her kit and began a methodical check of her equipment, pulling out hand-drawn charts rather than the standard-issue rangefinders and ballistic calculators the team used. Reed exchanged glances with Torres, rolling his eyes dramatically. "Another desk jockey sent to check boxes on their little clipboards. Just stay out of our way when the real work starts, ghost girl." Torres, the quietest of the group, seemed uncomfortable with Reed's open hostility, but said nothing as he continued adjusting his rifle scope. Cooper observed the woman's preparations with growing irritation. Her methods were unorthodox, ignoring standard protocols his team had drilled into muscle memory. When she finally pulled out a tattered notebook filled with handwritten calculations rather than using the digital equipment, his patience evaporated. "Look, I don't know what kind of observation you're conducting, but my team has a system. If you're going to be tagging along, you need to adapt to our protocols, not the other way around." The woman finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear, despite the scarf covering her mouth. "Your system assumes standard conditions. This range has anomalies." Cooper bristled at the implicit criticism. "We've been prepping for this exercise for 3 months. With all due respect to whatever credentials got you this assignment, we know what we're doing." She made no response, simply returning to her preparations as though the conversation had never happened. The dismissal was so complete that Cooper found himself more unsettled than if she had argued. As midday approached, the various teams were deployed to their first stations. Cooper's unit was assigned to the eastern ridge for initial accuracy assessment. The glaring sun beat down mercilessly as they hiked to their position, the woman keeping pace without complaint despite the heavy kit and punishing heat. At the ridge, they found a simple setup, targets at various ranges from 400 to 800 meters, standard for qualification rather than special operations training. Cooper couldn't hide his disappointment. "Kindergarten stuff," Reed complained, setting up his rifle with careless confidence. "I could hit these blindfolded." The woman said nothing, but Cooper noticed her studying the terrain with unusual focus, eyes tracking something beyond the obvious target field. When Reed prepared for his first shot, she suddenly spoke. "The wind is changing." Reed ignored her, squeezing off his shot with a confident smirk that faded when the shot landed wide right of the target. He frowned, making a quick adjustment before firing again. This time the shot struck the target but well off center. "What the hell?" Reed muttered, checking his scope. "The wind shouldn't be shifting that much here." Without speaking, the woman removed her gloves to make a notation in her book. The movement revealed an intricate tattoo running down her forearm, geometric patterns intertwined with symbols none of them recognized. It wasn't the typical military ink that most operators sported, not unit insignias or memorial tributes. Reed noticed immediately. "Nice art," he laughed. "You get that on Etsy, or is that what passes for badass where you're from?" She replaced her glove without responding, but Cooper caught a brief flash of something in her eyes. Not anger or embarrassment, but a weariness that seemed out of place. Torres, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "The canyon creates unusual wind patterns here. The range data doesn't account for it." Cooper took his position, determined to outperform Reed despite the conditions. As he prepared his shot, he felt a presence beside him. The woman had moved closer, watching his setup with that same unsettling focus. 3 degrees left. Adjust for crosswind at target midpoint, not origin. Her voice was so soft only Cooper could hear. He wanted to ignore her, to prove his team's competence without outside help. But something in her quiet certainty made him hesitate. Without acknowledging her advice, he made a slight adjustment to his calculations. His shot hit dead center. Reed and Torres looked surprised, but Cooper offered no explanation for his success. The woman had already moved back to her position, making notes in her mysterious book as though nothing had happened. As the day progressed, Cooper's team rotated through various stations, performing adequately but not exceptionally. The woman remained a shadow, observing without comment, except for occasional cryptic remarks that proved frustratingly accurate when heated and costly when ignored. By the time they reached the mess hall for the evening meal, Cooper's initial dismissal had evolved into reluctant curiosity. The woman's knowledge of ballistics and terrain reading went beyond textbook understanding, suggesting real-world experience that contradicted her civilian appearance. The mess hall buzzed with the day's results, teams comparing notes and establishing the informal hierarchy that would define the coming days. Cooper's team sat with other Marine units, while the woman found an isolated corner, still partially concealed by her hood, despite being indoors. Reed, whose performance had been mediocre throughout the day, seemed determined to reestablish his standing. "You notice Ghost Girl never actually fires a weapon, just hovers around making cryptic comments. Bet she's never shot anything bigger than a stapler." Torres frowned. She knew about the wind patterns. "Lucky guess," Reed dismissed. "Or she read it in some report. There's a difference between knowing something in theory and having the skills to execute under pressure." Cooper remained silent, watching as other operators cast curious glances toward the isolated figure. The day's performance rankings would be posted soon, and despite himself, he wondered how his team's results might have improved if he'd been more receptive to the observer's subtle guidance. The mess hall doors opened, admitting a striking woman in her mid-40s, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized sharp cheekbones and watchful eyes. Dr. Alara Kenty carried herself with the confident authority of someone accustomed to classified briefings rather than field operations. Her arrival silenced the room momentarily before conversations resumed at a more subdued volume. Cooper knew Kenty by reputation only. An intelligence officer with specialized knowledge of psychological operations and unconventional warfare, her presence at a training exercise was unusual enough to raise questions. Kenty surveyed the room with clinical detachment until her gaze landed on the hooded figure in the corner. Something flashed across her face, too quick to identify, before she composed herself and approached Commander Thorne at the officers' table. Reed had also noticed the exchange. "Looks like Ghost Girl is important enough to bring out the brass. Wonder what her story really is." "Important enough to be here," Cooper remarked, surprising himself by defending the stranger. Reed wasn't satisfied. Rising from the table, he sauntered toward the isolated figure, ignoring Cooper's warning look. Several nearby conversations quieted as operators sensed potential confrontation. "The rest of us have earned our place here," Reed announced loudly, stopping before the woman's table. "Combat deployments, specialized training, years of proven field experience. What exactly have you done that gives you the right to evaluate elite operators?" The woman looked up slowly, eyes calm beneath her hood. "I was where I needed to be." The simple response seemed to inflame Reed further. "Where you needed to be, that's it? No credentials, no qualifications, just cryptic bullshit while the rest of us sweat and bleed?" Laughter rippled through the nearby tables, operators enjoying the confrontation that voiced their collective curiosity. Cooper rose, moving to intervene before Reed could escalate further, but Dr. Kenty beat him to it. "Petty Officer Reed," she said, her voice carrying a subtle warning, "I believe your team is scheduled for night operations briefing." Reed hesitated, caught between continuing his performance and directly challenging a superior. Self-preservation won out. "Yes, ma'am." As he retreated, Kenty turned to the hooded woman. "A word, please, outside." The woman gathered her notebook and followed Kenty from the mess hall without comment. Cooper, his curiosity overriding his better judgment, positioned himself near the exit, catching fragments of their hushed conversation as they passed. "You shouldn't have come back," Kenty was saying, her voice urgent rather than angry. "They're still watching." The woman's response was too quiet to hear, but Cooper caught the movement as Kenty pressed something small into her hand before they disappeared around the corner. The exchange had the practiced smoothness of long familiarity, contradicting the official narrative that the observer was just another evaluation contractor. Returning to his team, Cooper found Reed already spinning the confrontation to his advantage. "Did you see how she couldn't even defend herself? Just sat there like a scared rabbit." "She wasn't scared," Cooper corrected, remembering the calm eyes beneath the hood. "And Kenty seemed to know her." "Probably just another intel weenie," Reed dismissed. "I still say she's never seen actual combat. No operator with real experience acts like that." Cooper wasn't convinced, but further discussion was interrupted as Commander Thorne entered the mess hall, moving with purposeful strides toward the communications station. Something in his expression silenced the room before he even spoke. "All personnel, secure your stations. We have a potential security breach." The mess hall erupted into controlled chaos as operators moved to predetermined positions. Cooper led his team toward their assigned sector, scanning for their missing observer, but seeing no sign of her or Dr. Kenty in the confusion. From his position near the communications hub, Commander Thorne spoke quietly into his radio, unaware that Cooper was close enough to overhear fragments of his transmission. "Confirm identity match, Phantom Task Force. Protocol Kingfisher is active." Cooper had never heard of Phantom Task Force or Protocol Kingfisher, but the tension in Thorne's voice suggested something far beyond a routine security drill. Before he could process the information, the facility plunged into darkness as emergency systems engaged, plunging the entire compound into lockdown procedures. In the sudden darkness, illuminated only by emergency lighting, Cooper caught a glimpse of a hooded figure moving with purpose toward the armory. Not running in panic, but advancing with methodical precision. Then the figure was gone, disappearing into shadows as alarms began to wail across the compound. Cooper felt a cold certainty settle over him. Whatever was happening went far beyond a training exercise. The mysterious observer was at the center of it, and nothing about her presence was coincidental. As his team secured their position, Cooper found himself caught between protocol and curiosity. The woman's notebook remained behind in the chaos, partially visible beneath an overturned chair. Making a split-second decision, he retrieved it and tucked it into his gear before anyone could notice. "Status report," Reed demanded, taking position at a security checkpoint. Cooper hesitated, the weight of the notebook like a physical presence against his chest. "Standard procedure, secure position, and await further orders." Outside, the desert night had fallen completely, cloaking the compound in darkness, broken only by harsh security lights that created more shadows than illumination. Whatever had triggered the alert remained unclear, but Cooper couldn't shake the connection to their mysterious observer and the cryptic words he had overheard. Phantom Task Force, Protocol Kingfisher. The names echoed in his mind, pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed until today. As the alarms continued to sound, Cooper made a silent promise to himself that, before this exercise ended, he would discover the truth about the woman with the strange tattoo and the secrets that had followed her into the desert. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the compound perimeter, watchful eyes observed the chaos unfolding within, patient and calculating. The real exercise had only just begun. Would you share a moment when someone unexpected proved their worth against all doubts? Leave your story in the comments, and if this resonates with you, consider subscribing for more tales of hidden strength and redemption. The lockdown lasted 3 hours. When the all-clear finally sounded, rumors spread through the compound like wildfire. Some claimed terrorists had breached the perimeter. Others insisted it was just another stress test, designed to evaluate their response under pressure. Cooper knew better. Whatever had triggered the alert was connected to their mysterious observer, now conspicuously absent from the reconvening teams. Commander Thorne provided no explanation beyond a terse security protocol verification when questioned. His expression remained unreadable, but the tight set of his jaw betrayed tension. Dr. Kenty stood at his side during the briefing, her clinical gaze sweeping over the assembled operators as though cataloging their reactions. "Tomorrow's exercises will proceed as scheduled," Thorne announced. "All teams return to quarters and prepare for ZOA 500 deployment." As the teams dispersed, Cooper noticed Reed watching him with narrowed eyes. "You disappeared during the lockdown. Where were you?" "Securing our position as ordered," Cooper replied evenly. The notebook felt heavy in his pocket, its secrets pressing against him like an accusation. Reed seemed unconvinced but let the matter drop. "Any sign of our ghost mascot?" "No." The lie came easily, though Cooper wasn't entirely sure why he felt compelled to protect information about the woman. Professional curiosity, he told himself, nothing more. Back in their temporary quarters, Cooper waited until his teammates were occupied before examining his find. The notebook's cover was weathered leather, cracked and stained with substances he preferred not to identify. No name, no identifying marks. Just a small symbol embossed on the back cover, geometric and unfamiliar, similar to elements in the woman's tattoo. Inside, the pages contain dense calculations, but not in any system Cooper recognized from his sniper training. Columns of numbers interspersed with symbols that might have been some form of shorthand. Several pages held rough sketches of terrain, including what appeared to be the training facility's layout, with positions marked in the same cryptic notation. But what caught Cooper's attention were the names, lists of them, some crossed out with precise lines and dates noted beside them. Most were unfamiliar, though he recognized a few as high-profile terrorist targets eliminated in recent years. The final pages contained a list of the current exercise participants, including Cooper's team. No marks beside any names, but the current date was noted at the top of the page with a question mark. The implications were disturbing. Was this a hit list? Assessment rankings? Cooper couldn't decipher the meaning, but one thing became clear. The woman was no ordinary observer. He slipped the notebook back into his pocket as Reed returned to the room. Teams are saying the ghost disappeared completely, Reed reported, dropping onto his bunk. Even her gear is gone from the storage area. Cooper maintained a neutral expression. Maybe she completed her observation. Or maybe she was the security breach, Reed suggested. Think about it. Shows up unannounced, asks weird questions, then vanishes during a lockdown. Classic infiltration pattern. Torres, who had been silently maintaining his equipment, looked up. If she was hostile, why warn us about the wind patterns? She helped improve our scores. Reed scoffed. Building trust before the betrayal, oldest trick in the book. Cooper let them debate, his mind returning to the fragments he'd overheard. Phantom Task Force, Protocol Kingfisher. Whatever game was being played, they were peripheral pieces on a much larger board. Sleep came fitfully that night. Cooper woke at 0300, restless and alert without knowing why. The compound was silent except for the occasional patrol, but something had disturbed his sleep. A sound just at the edge of perception, familiar yet out of place. Rifle fire, single shots, precisely spaced. Cooper dressed quickly and slipped out of the quarters. The sound came from the furthest training range, technically off limits outside scheduled exercises. He moved silently through the compound, years of field craft allowing him to evade the patrol routes. At the range perimeter, he paused behind a storage container, peering carefully around the edge. In the pale moonlight, a solitary figure stood at the firing line, silhouette unmistakable despite the distance. The hooded woman, no longer hiding, was systematically engaging targets at extreme range, her rifle reporting with a distinctive sound that explained why it had caught Cooper's attention even in sleep. Not standard issue, something older with a unique acoustical signature. He watched as she fired 5 rounds in rapid succession, each finding its mark with unerring precision. These weren't standard qualification targets, but improvised markers at distances that pushed the limits of the weapon's capabilities. She fired without using a spotter, making adjustments based solely on her own calculations. Cooper had trained with some of the best snipers in the Marine Corps. What he witnessed now wasn't just skill, it was artistry, born from experience that went far beyond range qualifications and tactical exercises. When the woman finally lowered her rifle, Cooper stepped from concealment, making his presence known. No point pretending he hadn't been watching. Impressive shooting, he said quietly, especially without a spotter. She turned toward him, unsurprised by his presence. In the moonlight, with her hood pulled back, he caught his first clear glimpse of her features, striking and severe, with eyes that held the focused intensity he'd seen in operators who'd spent too long behind enemy lines. A faint scar traced her right temple, disappearing into her hairline. "You should be resting for tomorrow's exercise," she said, her voice clearer without the scarf covering her face. Hard to rest with someone conducting live fire exercises at 0300. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "The wind speaks differently here than in Helmand. I needed to calibrate." The casual reference to Afghanistan's notorious Helmand province caught Cooper off guard. "Your file didn't mention deployment there." "My file says what it needs to say." She began breaking down her rifle with practiced efficiency. Nothing more. Cooper watched her hands move with the automatic precision of muscle memory, noting the unusual modifications to her weapon. Not standard military issue, not even special operations customization. Something entirely different. "Who are you really?" he asked directly, tired of cryptic responses. She paused, studying him with that same unsettling focus. Someone completing a mission, just like you. What mission? This is a training exercise, not an operation. Everything is an operation, Cooper. The sooner you understand that, the longer you'll survive. The statement carried weight beyond simple philosophical posturing. Cooper felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. Are we in danger? Instead of answering, she glanced past him toward the compound. You took my notebook. It wasn't a question, and denial seemed pointless. I found it during the lockdown. And read it. I couldn't understand most of it, Cooper admitted. The calculations, the symbols, they're not any system I recognize. That's by design. She held out her hand expectantly. Cooper hesitated. The notebook represented his only tangible connection to whatever was actually happening. Surrendering it meant returning to ignorance, to being a pawn in someone else's game. You recognize the names, she said, correctly reading his hesitation. That's why you're here now? You want answers? Are they targets? Cooper asked. The crossed-out names, were they your kills? Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, a momentary softening that humanized her intensity. Not kills, saves. Before Cooper could process this response, distant movement caught his attention. A patrol was approaching the range, sweeping flashlight beams across the terrain. By the time he turned back, the woman was gone, melted into the darkness with a skill that left him questioning if their conversation had actually happened. The notebook remained in his possession, its mysteries now compounded by her cryptic explanation. Not kills, saves. Morning came too quickly. Cooper rejoined his team for the day's briefing, scanning the assembled operators for any sign of the woman, but she remained conspicuously absent. Commander Thorne appeared more strained than the previous day, dark circles beneath his eyes suggesting a sleepless night. Today's exercises will focus on equipment familiarization and malfunction management, Thorne announced. Recent field reports indicate increased tampering with operator equipment by hostile forces. You need to be prepared for system failures under combat conditions. Cooper exchanged glances with Torres. Equipment tampering wasn't a standard training scenario, especially for a joint exercise focused on tactical integration. Something had changed overnight. As teams deployed to their assigned stations, Cooper's unit discovered their equipment had already been prepared, though not according to their usual specifications. Subtle adjustments had been made to their rifles, alterations that would be unnoticeable until fired. Reed discovered the changes first, his practice shots veering consistently left, despite correct sight alignment. What the hell? Someone messed with my scope calibration. Cooper checked his own weapon, finding similar modifications. Not damage, but deliberate adjustments that required intimate knowledge of ballistics and the specific rifles they were using, the kind of knowledge their mysterious observer had demonstrated. This is part of the exercise, Cooper realized aloud. Thorne warned us about equipment tampering. We're supposed to identify and compensate. Torres nodded thoughtfully. Field adaptability assessment. Reed wasn't satisfied. This is sabotage, not training. Someone physically altered our gear without authorization. Or this is exactly what command authorized, Cooper countered, remembering the woman's words. Everything is an operation. Throughout the morning, other teams reported similar discoveries. Scopes misaligned, firing pins filed to subtly different tolerances, ammunition loads inconsistent. Small changes that compounded into significant performance impacts. Frustration mounted as scores dropped across all units. Elite operators suddenly struggling with basic marksmanship tasks. Cooper adapted more quickly than most, having observed the woman's unconventional adjustments the previous day. He suspected her hand in the equipment modifications, though whether as sabotage or training remained unclear. By midday, tensions were running high. Teams blamed each other for tampering, competitive spirit souring into genuine hostility. Cooper watched the deteriorating morale with growing concern, wondering if this too was part of whatever assessment was actually underway. During the brief lunch break, Cooper noticed Dr. Kenty observing the teams from a distance, making notes on a tablet with the detached interest of a scientist monitoring an experiment. When she caught him watching, she approached with measured steps. Gunnery Sergeant Cooper, your team is performing admirably despite the challenges. Cooper chose his words carefully. We're adapting to changing conditions, ma'am. Indeed. Her clinical gaze studied him as though cataloging micro-expressions. Adaptation is a critical survival trait. Not all operators possess it in equal measure. Is that what this exercise is really testing? Adaptation? A ghost of a smile touched her lips, reminiscent of the woman's expression the night before. Everything tests something, Sergeant Cooper. The question is whether you understand what's being measured. Before Cooper could press further, Commander Thorne's voice crackled over the communications system, announcing an unscheduled night infiltration exercise for all teams. Immediate deployment, full tactical gear. Dr. Kenty's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Interesting. That wasn't on today's schedule. As Cooper moved to rejoin his team, she caught his arm briefly. Trust your instincts tonight, Sergeant. They may prove more reliable than your orders. The cryptic warning lingered as Cooper's team prepared for the night exercise. Standard urban infiltration scenario, moving through a mock village to locate and eliminate designated targets. Routine training for special operators, though the hasty deployment and tense atmosphere lent an edge to the proceedings. At the assembly point, Cooper was surprised to find their hooded observer waiting. She stood slightly apart from the other teams, equipment prepared, and face once again partially concealed. Reed's reaction was immediate and hostile. Look who decided to rejoin us. Come to sabotage more equipment? She ignored the accusation, addressing Cooper directly. I've been assigned to your team for this evolution. Cooper nodded, ignoring Reed's sputtered objections. Whatever game was being played, having her close might provide answers, or at least protection if her warnings proved accurate. The mock village stood dark and silent as teams deployed to their starting positions. Cooper's unit was assigned the northeastern approach, tasked with clearing a series of structures while identifying high-value targets among the role players scattered throughout the compound. As they advanced under cover of darkness, Cooper noticed the woman moving with practiced silence, her positioning creating optimal coverage for their small unit without needing direction. Her rifle remained holstered, a compact sidearm in hand instead, suggesting she anticipated close quarters engagement rather than the distance shooting the exercise supposedly required. 20 minutes into the infiltration, they had cleared 3 structures without incident. The exercise seemed straightforward, almost suspiciously so, given the day's earlier complications. As they approached the 4th building, a 2-story structure with multiple entry points, the woman suddenly held up a closed fist, the universal signal to halt. Cooper froze, scanning for whatever had triggered her warning. Nothing seemed amiss, the building dark and silent like the others. We need to change course, she said quietly, voice barely audible. Reed scoffed. Why? This is our assigned route. There's an unmarked demolition charge in that structure, not simulated. Cooper studied her expression, finding only calm certainty. How could you know that? The same way I know the wind patterns changed yesterday. Experience. She pointed to an alternative route. We go around, approach from the south instead. Reed looked to Cooper, clearly expecting him to overrule the suggestion. Protocol dictated they maintain their assigned route unless directly ordered otherwise. Deviating could impact their assessment scores or even fail them outright. Dr. Kenty's words echoed in Cooper's mind. Trust your instincts tonight. They may prove more reliable than your orders. We'll take the southern approach, he decided, ignoring Reed's look of disbelief. They had just changed course when an explosion rocked the compound, the concussive force knocking them to the ground despite their distance from the blast. The building they had been approaching collapsed inward, debris raining down exactly where they would have been positioned for entry. Chaos erupted across the exercise area. Emergency lights activated as medical teams rushed forward. Through the swirling dust, Cooper saw Commander Thorne sprinting toward the blast site, his expression a mask of controlled fury rather than concern. That was no training explosion, Torres observed quietly, helping Reed to his feet. That was a real demolition charge. Cooper turned to their observer, but she was already moving, slipping away toward the command post with purpose in her stride. Without hesitation, he followed, leaving Reed and Torres to report to the emergency assembly point. He caught up to her in the shadows behind the communications tent, where she had positioned herself to overhear the frantic exchanges inside without being seen. Cooper crouched beside her, close enough to catch the command staff's urgent conversation. Who authorized live demolitions on my range? Thorne demanded, his voice tight with controlled rage. No authorization was given, an unfamiliar voice responded. All exercise parameters were simulation only. This was unauthorized. Sabotage, another voice suggested. Or a message, Dr. Kenty's clinical tone cut through the tension. A demonstration that the exercise isn't as controlled as we believed. Cooper glanced at the woman beside him, finding her expression unreadable as she listened. Whatever connection she had to these events, she had saved his team from being caught in the blast. That counted for something. "Secure the perimeter," Thorne ordered. "Full accountability of all personnel. I want to know who had access to demolition materials and when." As staff scrambled to comply, Thorne lowered his voice, now audible only to those directly beside him, and those, like Cooper and his companion, positioned perfectly to eavesdrop. "This changes the timeline," Thorne said quietly. "Phantom Task Force was dissolved for a reason, Alara." "3 survivors," Dr. Kente replied, her clinical detachment momentarily slipping. "All declared KIA, yet one walks among us. The other 2 are confirmed dead now. She's the last, and they'll come for her. Not if we complete the test protocol first." Cooper felt the woman tense beside him, a nearly imperceptible shift that communicated volumes. Whatever Phantom Task Force represented, it was central to the events unfolding around them, and somehow, their hooded observer was its last surviving member. Before Cooper could process this revelation, a hand closed firmly on his shoulder. He turned to find Reed standing behind them, expression dark with suspicion. "Missed you at the assembly point," Reed said, voice deliberately loud enough to carry. "Interesting place to conduct damage assessment, behind the command post." The woman was gone before Cooper could respond, disappearing into shadows with the same preternatural skill she'd demonstrated at the firing range. Reed's expression hardened further. "She's involved in this somehow. The explosion, the equipment tampering, all of it. And you're helping her." "She saved our lives," Cooper countered. "She knew about the explosion before it happened. Or she caused it and made sure we weren't caught in her demonstration. Classic psychological manipulation, Cooper. Make us feel indebted so we trust her next move." Cooper couldn't entirely dismiss Reed's logic, but something deeper than reason told him the woman wasn't their enemy. The notebook's cryptic entries echoed in his mind. Not kills. Saves. If she wanted us dead, there were easier methods than elaborate explosions, Cooper said finally. "Whatever's happening here goes beyond our training exercise." Reed studied him for a long moment. "You've got her notebook, don't you? That's how you knew to follow her tonight." Cooper maintained eye contact, neither confirming nor denying. "Return to the assembly point. Tell Torres I'm conducting reconnaissance as ordered." "Ordered by whom?" Reed challenged. "Because it wasn't Commander Thorne. The standoff might have escalated, but a commotion near the command tent drew their attention. New arrivals, a trio of unmarked helicopters landing just beyond the perimeter, disgorging figures in tactical gear that didn't match any unit involved in the exercise. Reinforcements? Reed wondered. Cooper watched as the newcomers approached the command post, with the confident stride of authority rather than the cautious advance of responders to an emergency. Or, oversight, someone just changed the game. When Cooper finally returned to their quarters hours later, he found the team gathered around Torres's equipment case, expressions grim. Reed looked up as he entered, hostility momentarily set aside. "Tomorrow's challenge has been announced, special directive from command." Cooper sensed the tension. "What's the scenario?" Torres handed him the briefing document. "Long-range elimination, 1,600 meters, moving target with crosswind conditions." "That's beyond effective range for standard issue," Cooper observed, immediately calculating the challenge. "Even with our specialized kit, it's at the extreme edge of operational parameters." "Exactly," Reed confirmed. "It's not a training evolution, it's an impossible standard. Nobody's expected to succeed." "Then what's the point?" Reed's expression darkened. "To prove we can't do it. To justify bringing in specialists for the real mission, whatever that is." Cooper considered this as he reviewed the parameters more carefully. The specific conditions, the unusual distance, the timing after an unauthorized explosion, all suggested a test designed for failure, or perhaps for a very specific kind of success. They're creating a problem only one person can solve, Cooper realized aloud. The pieces suddenly connecting. She's not just an observer, she's a demonstration model. Torres looked up sharply. "The hooded woman? You think this entire exercise is about showcasing her abilities? Or confirming them," Cooper amended, remembering the overheard conversation. testing a specific skill set against elite operators to establish comparative baselines. Reed wasn't convinced. Why the secrecy? Why the explosion? If they want to evaluate a specialist, there are standard protocols. Unless the specialist isn't supposed to exist, Cooper suggested quietly, the implications of Phantom Task Force, and declared KIA status coalescing into disturbing clarity. You can't officially evaluate someone who's officially dead. The revelation settled over the team with uncomfortable weight. Whatever tomorrow's challenge represented, they were peripheral participants in a demonstration they didn't fully understand, measured against a standard they weren't meant to meet. As his teammates prepared their equipment for the morning, Cooper slipped the mysterious notebook from its hiding place, studying the calculations with new understanding. Not random notations, but a personalized ballistics system, developed for conditions beyond standard operational parameters. The crossed-out names were neither targets nor simple saves, but individuals connected to classified operations. People whose survival depended on shots no conventional sniper could make. The woman wasn't just a skilled operator. She was something else entirely, a ghost given form only when needed, then returned to official non-existence after completing her mission. Morning broke with tense anticipation across the compound. Teams prepared with grim determination despite the impossible parameters. Cooper watched as Commander Thorne conferred with the newly arrived tactically equipped officers, their bearings suggesting high-level military intelligence rather than standard command structure. On the firing line, Cooper's team methodically checked their equipment, knowing success was unlikely, but professional pride demanding their best effort regardless. Reed had spent hours recalibrating his rifle, while Torres calculated wind patterns with obsessive precision. As other teams took their attempts, the results confirmed their expectations. No one came close to hitting the moving target at the extreme distance specified. Even the best shots missed by significant margins. The combination of distance, movement, and unpredictable wind, creating an equation with too many variables for conventional solutions. Cooper's team performed admirably by standard metrics, their shots grouping better than most, but still falling wide of the actual target. As they completed their attempt, Reed's frustration finally boiled over. "This is bull. No one can make that shot with this equipment under these conditions." His voice carried across the suddenly quiet range, drawing attention from the assembled observers and command staff. In the tense silence that followed, Reed's eyes fixed on the hooded figure, standing slightly apart from the others, watching the proceedings with that same unsettling calm. "Since our advisor seems to have all the answers," Reed called out, loud enough for everyone to hear, "maybe she should demonstrate her expertise." The challenge hung in the air like a physical thing. Cooper watched as Commander Thorne exchanged glances with Dr. Kenty, a silent communication that suggested this confrontation was not entirely unexpected. At the far end of the range, one of the tactical officers raised a hand to his earpiece, listening intently before nodding to his colleagues. Something had changed in the carefully orchestrated demonstration. Cooper noticed movement at the perimeter, additional security taking positions with an unusual focus, not facing outward to protect the compound, but inward, watching the proceedings with hands close to their weapons. Whatever was about to happen carried implications beyond a simple marksmanship challenge. The hooded woman stood motionless for a long moment, all eyes upon her. Then, with deliberate calm, she approached the firing line. As she passed Cooper's position, their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. She knew he understood, at least partially, what was truly happening. Reed's challenge had been meant to humiliate, to expose what he perceived as pretension. What he couldn't know was that he had inadvertently triggered the very demonstration the exercise had been designed to create. As the woman reached the firing line, silence fell completely over the range. She removed her dust scarf and pushed back her hood, revealing her face fully for the first time to the assembled operators. The scar at her temple caught the morning light, a silver line that told its own story of survival against impossible odds. From beneath her gear, she retrieved an old rifle case, weathered and marked, with symbols similar to those in her notebook and tattoo. As she opened it and assembled the custom weapon inside, Reed couldn't resist one final jab. "What museum did you steal that from?" She ignored him completely, focusing on her preparations with the same methodical precision Cooper had observed at the night range. Her movements were economical, practiced, the automatic motions of someone who had performed these exact actions under far more dangerous conditions than a training exercise. When she finally took position at the firing line, the atmosphere changed perceptibly. This was no longer a challenge or a competition. It was a demonstration of something few would ever witness, a skill set developed beyond conventional parameters for unconventional necessities. Cooper watched as she made final adjustments, noting how she ignored the digital rangefinders and ballistic calculators others had relied upon. Instead, she used hand calculations, factoring variables that standard training didn't even acknowledge. Before firing, she whispered something in a language Cooper didn't recognize, a brief ritual that seemed deeply personal rather than tactical. Then, with perfect stillness, she took the shot. The distinctive crack of her rifle echoed across the range, followed by a sound Cooper had heard only in training videos, never in person, the clear ring of a direct hit on the distant steel target. The impossible shot had been made. The moving target at 1,600 meters with crosswind variables had been struck dead center, a feat beyond the capabilities of even the most elite conventional snipers. In the stunned silence that followed, Cooper watched as Commander Thorne approached the firing line slowly, his expression shifting from controlled neutrality to something far more complex. Recognition, respect, and beneath it all, a profound disbelief that bordered on reverence. The tactical officers moved forward as well, hands still hovering near their weapons as though uncertain whether they were witnessing the confirmation of an asset or the emergence of a threat. As Thorne reached the woman's position, something extraordinary happened. The hardened SEAL commander, a man who had faced death in countless operations across 3 decades of service, slowly lowered himself to one knee before her. A gesture of respect so profound, it sent shockwaves through the watching operators. Cooper couldn't hear what passed between them, but he saw Thorne's expression transform as the woman finally spoke clearly, handing him the spent shell casing from her impossible shot. Whatever she said caused the commander's face to drain of color, recognition giving way to something that looked almost like awe. In that moment, as the desert sun illuminated the scene with harsh clarity, Cooper understood that everything, from his team's assignment to the equipment tampering to the explosion, had been leading to this precise moment of revelation. The mysterious woman with the strange tattoo had silenced a firing range and brought a SEAL commander to his knees with one perfect shot, demonstrating a capability that wasn't supposed to exist. And behind them all, the tactical officers exchanged glances of grim satisfaction, as though a theory had been proven or an experiment had yielded expected results. Whatever Operation Kingfisher truly was, its next phase had just been initiated, with consequences none of them could yet predict. Have you ever witnessed someone reveal extraordinary skill when it mattered most, changing everyone's perception in an instant? Share your story of unexpected excellence in the comments below, and subscribe to experience more moments when true capability reveals itself against all doubts. The shot echoed across the Nevada desert, a perfect sonic punctuation to the impossible feat they had just witnessed. One woman, one rifle, one target at 1,600 meters in crosswind conditions. The steel plate at the far end of the range, barely visible to the naked eye, had rung with the unmistakable sound of a direct hit. The range remained silent, dozens of elite operators frozen in collective disbelief. What they had just witnessed defied the physics they had built their careers upon, the ballistic certainties that separated possible from impossible in their dangerous profession. Commander Thorne remained on one knee before the woman, his weathered face transformed by recognition. When he finally spoke, his voice carried clearly across the hushed range. "Captain Zaira Vanek," he announced, each word measured and deliberate. "Phantom Task Force, Special Operations Group Delta." The name meant nothing to most of the assembled operators, but Cooper watched as the tactical officers exchanged glances loaded with significance. Whatever Phantom Task Force represented, its mere mention had shifted the power dynamics on the range. Zaira stood calmly, rifle still in hand, her face now fully visible in the harsh desert sun. Without the concealing hood, Cooper could see the full extent of the scar that traced her right temple, disappearing into her hairline. Not a random injury, but the distinctive mark of a close-range bullet graze, the kind that killed most who received it. Thorne rose slowly, addressing the confused operators. 6 years ago, in Helmand Province, My SEAL platoon was pinned down by enemy fire. Our position was compromised. Extraction impossible. His voice caught slightly before continuing. A single sniper eliminated 23 threats over 18 hours, allowing my men to reach safety. The sniper was never identified and was reported killed in action when the position was overrun. The implications settled across the range like a physical weight. Cooper glanced at Reed, whose earlier mockery had evaporated into stunned silence. Captain Vanek didn't die, Thorne continued, his gaze never leaving the woman before him. She completed her mission and disappeared, as phantom operators were trained to do. Zaira finally spoke, her voice clear and carrying farther than seemed possible for its quiet intensity. I wasn't sent here to evaluate your men, Commander. I was sent to warn you. The other survivors from my unit have been systematically eliminated. Someone is erasing Phantom's existence completely. The tactical officers moved forward at this declaration, their hands shifting closer to their weapons. One made a sharp gesture, and additional security personnel appeared at the range perimeter, their attention focused entirely on Zaira. Dr. Kenty stepped forward, positioning herself between Zaira and the advancing officers. From her pocket, she withdrew a slim folder marked with classified designations. Phantom Task Force never officially existed, she announced, her clinical tone lending authority to the extraordinary statement. Their missions were deemed too controversial, their methods too effective. She pointed to the intricate tattoo visible on Zaira's forearm. This isn't decorative, it's operational data, coordinates, codes, identification markers embedded in the design. Cooper suddenly understood the notebooks, cryptic notations, not just personal shorthand, but an encoding system designed to be unrecognizable to anyone but its creator. Reed had moved to Cooper's side, his earlier hostility replaced by professional respect. She knew, he said quietly. About the wind, about the explosion. She was protecting us. Zaira extended her hand, offering Commander Thorne the spent shell casing from her impossible shot. The simple gesture carried ritual significance that transcended the technical demonstration they had witnessed. Neither you nor your men should have made it out of Helmand alive, Commander, she said, her voice carrying despite its softness. Someone wanted your entire team eliminated that day. My orders were different. Thorne accepted the casing, recognition dawning on his face. The exercise, he said slowly. It's not an exercise at all, is it? No, Zaira confirmed. It's a selection. Someone inside military intelligence is identifying which of you can be trusted with the truth. The lead tactical officer stepped forward, removing his dark glasses to reveal features hardened by years of classified operations. That's enough, Captain Vanek. The demonstration phase is complete. Zaira didn't acknowledge him, her attention remaining on Commander Thorne. 6 years ago, I received orders to ensure your team's survival despite conflicting directives from higher command. Today, similar conflicting orders are being issued across multiple theaters. Operators are being positioned against each other without knowing they serve opposing masters. The tactical officer's expression hardened. This briefing is not authorized, Captain. Neither was the attempt on Commander Thorne's team, Zaira countered, finally turning to face the officer. Yet the orders carried proper authentication. The system is compromised, Colonel Barrett. You know it as well as I do. The name registered with Cooper, connecting to briefings he'd received years earlier. Colonel Marcus Barrett, Special Activities Division, a shadow figure in intelligence circles who supposedly oversaw operations too sensitive for conventional chains of command. Barrett's expression revealed nothing as he surveyed the assembled operators. This has gone beyond the parameters of Protocol Kingfisher. All personnel will return to quarters for individual debriefing. No one moved. The chain of command had been clear until moments ago, but Zaira's revelation had introduced doubt that even the most disciplined operators couldn't ignore. Whose orders could be trusted when the system itself might be compromised? Commander Thorne broke the impasse, his authority reasserting itself through decades of earned respect. All team leaders, secure your units, standard protocol for command uncertainty. It was a rarely invoked directive, taught but almost never implemented outside of extreme scenarios where command structures might be corrupted or compromised. Teams would maintain internal integrity, following only direct orders from trusted superiors until situation clarity could be established. As the operators dispersed with new purpose, Cooper noticed Dr. Kenty slipping a small device to Zaira, the exchange hidden from Barrett's view by their relative positions. Whatever game was being played had multiple layers, with alliances forming and shifting beneath the surface. Reed watched the interaction with narrowed eyes. "This goes all the way to the top, doesn't it?" he asked quietly. Cooper nodded, pieces connecting in his mind. Someone wants certain operators eliminated, others protected, competing agendas within the same command structure. "And we're caught in the middle," Torres added, having joined them silently. "Not caught," Cooper corrected. "Selected. Everything since the transport arrived has been evaluation and assessment. Our reactions, our adaptability, our willingness to question when necessary." Reed's gaze followed Zaira as she was escorted toward the command center, flanked by Barrett's security team. She didn't come to be evaluated. She came to evaluate us. The realization settled over Cooper with uncomfortable weight. The notebook's lists weren't random names, but specific operators, individuals Zaira had been assessing for qualities beyond their tactical proficiency. Loyalty, perhaps, or the moral flexibility to question orders when necessary. The compound transformed over the next hours, security protocols engaging that had never been part of the original exercise parameters. Communication systems were locked down, outside contact restricted, and teams isolated in designated sectors under observation. Cooper's team found themselves sequestered in the Tactical Operations Center, ostensibly for debriefing, but the questions they faced focused less on the day's events and more on their service histories, specifics, operations they'd conducted, and their relationships with superior officers. When Cooper's turn came, he found himself facing Colonel Barrett across a small table, the tactical officer's expression unreadable behind mirrored sunglasses. "Your service record is exemplary, Gunnery Sergeant Cooper," Barrett began, reviewing a file that seemed more comprehensive than standard military documentation. Multiple deployments, consistent performance ratings, and specific commendation for ethical decision-making under pressure. Cooper maintained neutral professionalism, recognizing the interview for what it was, an assessment of his potential reliability in whatever operation was actually unfolding. "You've served under Commander Thorne's indirect command before," Barrett continued. "Operation Sandstone, 2019, your unit provided overwatch for his SEAL team during the extraction phase." "Yes, sir." "Did you ever question his tactical decisions during that operation?" Cooper considered his response carefully. "We adapted to changing conditions based on real-time intelligence. Any adjustments to the original plan were made collaboratively." Barrett removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that had witnessed things beyond Cooper's clearance level. "That's not what I asked, Sergeant. Did you ever question his decisions?" "When necessary for mission success and team safety." "Yes," Cooper answered honestly. "That's part of effective team integration." A ghost of a smile touched Barrett's lips. "Captain Vanek said you would answer that way. It's why your name wasn't crossed out in her notebook." The implication sent a chill through Cooper's professional composure. Crossed-out names in the notebook had specific meaning beyond simple notation. Not kills. Saves, she had said. But saves from what? "Sir, what exactly is Protocol Kingfisher?" Cooper asked directly, deciding that professional caution was less valuable than clarity in the current situation. Barrett studied him for a long moment before responding. "A contingency activation, Sergeant Cooper, for scenarios where conventional command structures may be compromised at the highest levels. And Phantom Task Force, a resource developed for missions requiring skills beyond conventional parameters. Operators selected for unique capabilities and exceptional decision-making under ethical pressure." Captain Vanek's demonstration today wasn't about marksmanship, Cooper realized aloud. It was about establishing credibility for whatever comes next. Barrett's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested Cooper's assessment was correct. "Captain Vanek technically doesn't exist, Sergeant. Her service record was erased when Phantom Task Force was officially dissolved 3 years ago. All members were listed as killed in action in various theaters to maintain operational security. But someone is eliminating them for real," Cooper concluded, connecting the fragments of overheard conversations. The crossed-out names in her notebook? They weren't targets she eliminated. They were fellow Phantom operators who've been killed despite their official non-existence. "You understand why this creates a problem," Barrett said, neither confirming nor denying Cooper's assessment. If someone is systematically eliminating operators who officially don't exist, they have access to information at the highest classification levels. Cooper processed the implications. The explosion yesterday, it wasn't part of your test. No. Barrett's admission came with a tightening of his jaw. Which means our operation has been compromised. Someone knows what we're doing here and is sending a message. When Cooper emerged from his debriefing, he found the compound in controlled chaos, additional security forces arriving by helicopter, equipment being transferred, and command staff engaged in urgent consultation. Whatever had been set in motion by Zaira's demonstration was accelerating beyond the original parameters. Reed and Torres waited near the Tactical Operations Center, their expressions suggesting their debriefings had covered similar ground to Cooper's. "They're deploying us," Reed said without preamble. "Full tactical loadout, real-world parameters." Cooper absorbed this with professional calm, though the implications were staggering. What had begun as a training exercise was transforming into an actual operation, with elite operators being rapidly repurposed for an undefined mission. Against whom? Cooper asked, the critical question in any deployment. Torres shook his head. "They're being deliberately vague. Internal security threat is all they'll say. We're supposed to report to the armory for specialized equipment issue." As they moved through the compound, Cooper noticed other teams receiving similar directives, the assembled elite operators transitioning from training mindset to operational focus with practiced efficiency. Despite the unusual circumstances, their professional discipline remained intact, a testament to the selection process that had brought them here. At the armory, they found Dr. Kenty overseeing the distribution of equipment that went beyond standard issue for even special operations units. Advanced communications with enhanced encryption, specialized ammunition, and targeting systems that Cooper had only seen in developmental briefings, not field deployment. "Doctor," Cooper acknowledged as she personally checked his issued gear. "This seems excessive for a training evolution." Kenty's clinical detachment had given way to focused intensity. "This stopped being training the moment Captain Vanek made that shot, Sergeant Cooper. Now it's verification and implementation." "Of what?" She hesitated, weighing operational security against the need for operator clarity. Protocol Kingfisher was designed as a fail-safe, a means of identifying and neutralizing threats from within our own command structure. Captain Vanek's demonstration confirmed that the protocol is necessary. Cooper accepted the specialized communications device she handed him, noting its non-standard configuration. "The chain of command has been compromised." "At multiple levels," Kenty confirmed, "which is why we're implementing distributed command architecture for this operation. Your team will receive mission parameters directly from Captain Vanek." Reed, who had been silently checking his equipment, looked up sharply. "The Ghost is giving orders now?" "The Ghost," Kenty corrected with unexpected steel in her voice, "has saved more operators' lives than anyone in this compound, Petty Officer Reed, including yours yesterday, when she diverted your team from that explosion." Reed had the grace to look chastened. "Where is she now?" "Briefing Commander Thorne on the full operational parameters. You'll join them when your equipment check is complete." As they finished their preparations, Cooper found himself studying the specialized ammunition they'd been issued. Not standard military rounds, but custom loads with characteristics he couldn't immediately identify. Like Zaira's rifle, they represented capabilities beyond conventional parameters, designed for missions with unique requirements. The briefing room was secured beyond normal protocols, with multiple authentication layers required for access. Inside, Cooper found Commander Thorne and Colonel Barrett engaged in intense discussion over tactical displays, while Zaira stood slightly apart, studying a map with the focused attention he had observed during her shooting preparation. She had transformed since the range demonstration, her hood and concealing scarf replaced by tactical gear that marked her as an active operator rather than an observer. The tattoo on her forearm remained visible, its intricate patterns now clearly identifiable as encoded operational data rather than decorative art. As Cooper's team entered, Zaira looked up, her expression revealing nothing, though her eyes held a hint of satisfaction, as though pieces were falling into place according to some predetermined plan. "Sergeant Cooper," Thorne acknowledged, "your team has been specifically requested for this operation based on your performance during the evaluation phase." Evaluation began the moment you encountered Captain Vanek, Barrett added, gesturing toward the tactical displays. Your responses to equipment tampering, unexpected explosions, and chain of command ambiguities were precisely what Protocol Kingfisher was designed to identify. Cooper processed this with professional calm, though the implications were significant. Their entire exercise experience had been a sophisticated assessment, with Zaira serving as both catalyst and evaluator. What exactly are we being deployed to do? Reed asked, his earlier hostility replaced by focused professionalism. Zaira stepped forward, assuming briefing authority with natural command presence. Phantom Task Force was created to operate in scenarios where conventional approaches fail and standard chains of command become liabilities rather than assets. We exist, or existed, in the spaces between official operations, conducting missions that official channels couldn't acknowledge. She gestured to the tactical display, which showed what appeared to be a secure military installation. 3 days ago, the last surviving member of my unit besides myself was eliminated inside this facility. Officially, it was recorded as a training accident. In reality, it was a precision operation conducted with inside knowledge and access. Who's the target? Cooper asked directly. Not who, Zaira corrected. What? The target is a compromised command structure that has been systematically eliminating operators who possess specific knowledge about unauthorized operations conducted against our own forces. The implications settled heavily over the room. Friendly fire incidents reframed as deliberate eliminations. Training accidents masking targeted removals of specific personnel. Commander Thorne took over, his authority grounding the extraordinary briefing in operational reality. Intelligence suggests a coordinated effort to remove operators who might connect certain incidents across multiple theaters. Captain Vanek's unit specialized in preventing these eliminations where possible, operating outside normal channels to protect assets who had been designated for removal by compromised command elements. Cooper thought of the notebook's cryptic entries. Not kills, saves. Operators Zaira had protected from friendly fire incidents that weren't accidents at all. Our mission, Thorne continued, is to secure specific documentation from a secured server at this facility, providing evidence of systematic targeting of U.S. operators by elements within our own command structure. We're conducting an unauthorized intelligence operation against our own headquarters? Reed asked, the professional implications immediately apparent. It's only unauthorized if you accept that the chain of command remains valid, Barrett interjected. Protocol Kingfisher exists precisely for scenarios where command authority has been compromised at levels that render normal operational parameters ineffective. Zaira's expression remained neutral, but her eyes held the intensity Cooper had observed on the firing range, the focused certainty of someone operating beyond conventional limitations. You've all been selected because you've demonstrated the capacity to question orders when necessary and make ethical judgments under pressure. The explosion yesterday, Cooper realized, it was a final test. One we didn't initiate, Barrett confirmed, which accelerated our timeline. Someone knows we're implementing Kingfisher and is moving to prevent it. The operational briefing continued with methodical precision, roles assigned according to demonstrated capabilities rather than standard team configurations. Cooper found himself designated as Zaira's operational partner, their complementary skill sets creating a specialized two-person element for the most critical phase of the mission. As teams dispersed to make final preparations, Cooper found himself alone with Zaira for the first time since her identity had been revealed. Without the concealing hood and with clear operational purpose, she carried herself with the unmistakable authority of someone who had operated beyond the parameters of conventional warfare. You knew from the beginning, Cooper said, not a question, but an observation. The notebook entries, the wind calculations, the equipment modifications. You were testing us all along. Zaira met his gaze directly. Testing, evaluating, and protecting. 3 separate objectives, sometimes in conflict. The shot at the range. It wasn't just demonstration, it was confirmation for those who needed to believe what they couldn't see themselves. She nodded once. Some truths can't be explained, only demonstrated. Commander Thorne knew what the shot meant because he'd seen its results before, in Helmand, when his team survived what should have been unsurvivable. Cooper thought of Thorne kneeling before her, not in subservience, but in profound recognition. You saved his men? "I completed my mission," she corrected. The mission parameters were to ensure specific operators survived, despite contrary orders within the chain of command. The implications were staggering, suggesting levels of internal conflict within military operations that went beyond anything Cooper had encountered in his career. Why reveal yourself now? If Phantom was disbanded and you were officially dead, why resurface? Zaira's expression softened slightly, humanity emerging from behind operational focus. Because the elimination protocols have expanded beyond specific operators to include entire units, what happened to my team is now happening to conventional forces. The shooter has become the target. Reed approached, his earlier antagonism replaced by professional respect. "Commander Thorne wants all team leaders for final coordination." As Zaira moved to join the command group, Reed watched her with new understanding. "I was wrong about her," he admitted quietly to Cooper. "That shot at the range, no one makes that without years of experience under actual combat conditions." "Experience we never saw because it wasn't supposed to exist," Cooper agreed, "just like her unit." Reed considered this. "You think there are more like her? Other units operating outside normal parameters?" "I think," Cooper said carefully, "that we've been selected for this mission precisely because we're capable of accepting that possibility without allowing it to compromise our effectiveness." As final preparations completed, Cooper noticed a subtle shift in the operational atmosphere. Despite the extraordinary circumstances and the implications of conducting an intelligence operation against their own command structure, the assembled operators moved with focused purpose rather than hesitation. Zaira had transformed them, not through direct authority, but through demonstrated capability that redefined their understanding of what was possible. The hooded observer they had dismissed had revealed herself as something beyond their training, a ghost made manifest only when absolutely necessary. Before deployment, Commander Thorne gathered the designated teams for final briefing. The weathered SEAL leader looked each operator in the eye, his expression conveying the gravity of what they were undertaking. "Standard operational parameters no longer apply," he stated simply. "You've been selected because you've demonstrated the capacity to make ethical judgments when protocols fail. Trust those instincts." As the teams prepared to board the waiting helicopters, Zaira approached Cooper one final time. She held out her hand, offering something small and metallic, the spent shell casing from her impossible shot. "Every shot has a purpose beyond the shooter," she said quietly. "This one completed its mission when you understood what it represented." Cooper accepted the casing, recognizing it for what it was, not just proof of extraordinary capability, but a symbol of the ethical burden that came with such skill. The power to act decisively when others couldn't or wouldn't. As they boarded the helicopter, Cooper noticed Reed watching their exchange with thoughtful intensity. The cocky SEAL who had mocked Zaira's strange tattoo now studied her with the respect reserved for legendary operators whose skills had been proven beyond question. "She's going to make that shot again, isn't she?" Reed asked as they lifted off. "Whatever we're really doing, it comes down to her making another impossible shot." Cooper considered the specialized ammunition they'd been issued, designed for capabilities beyond conventional parameters. Not her, he realized. Us. She's not here to take the shot. She's here to ensure we can take it when required. Understanding dawned on Reed's face. The entire exercise, the equipment tampering, the modified calculations, she was training us to operate beyond standard parameters. Teaching us to see what others miss, Cooper agreed. Wind patterns, terrain anomalies, situational indicators that don't fit standard assessment models. As the helicopter carried them toward an operation that officially didn't exist, against a threat that officially couldn't exist, Cooper felt a profound shift in his professional understanding. The hooded woman they had dismissed as an observer had revealed herself as not just an extraordinary operator, but as something more valuable, a teacher whose lessons might mean the difference between mission success and failure when conventional parameters no longer applied. In the harsh light of the Nevada desert, a ghost had materialized to reveal truths that existed in the shadows between official operations, and, in doing so, had transformed those fortunate enough to witness her demonstration from conventional operators into something more adaptable, more questioning, and ultimately more effective. The sun glinted off the spent shell casing in Cooper's hand, a small token of metal transformed into something profoundly symbolic by the skill of the one who had fired it. Just as Zaira had transformed from dismissed observer to respected commander through one perfect shot, they too were being transformed. Ordinary operators becoming something more purposeful, more precise in their ethical judgments. As the helicopter banked toward their objective, Cooper caught a final glimpse of the training range, now distant and diminished. What had begun as a straightforward exercise had evolved into something far more significant. A selection process for those capable of operating in the spaces between official missions, where the most important shots were those that saved lives rather than took them. Beside him, Zaira checked her equipment with the same methodical precision he had observed since her arrival, no longer hiding her expertise, but embodying it fully. The hood that had concealed her identity now hung loose around her shoulders, no longer necessary for the ghost, who had returned from official non-existence to complete one final mission. The tattoo on her forearm caught the light filtering through the helicopter windows, its intricate patterns no longer mysterious but purposeful, encoded data marking her as something beyond conventional parameters. Not just an operator, but a guardian operating in the shadows between official missions, protecting those who would never know they had been saved. In that moment, Cooper understood the true meaning of her earlier words, spoken quietly at the firing range when he had questioned her mysterious calculations. The wind speaks differently here than in Helmand. Not just a statement about ballistics, but about perception itself, about seeing patterns others missed and acting decisively when those patterns revealed threats beyond conventional understanding. The helicopter continued toward their objective, carrying a team transformed by the revelation of a ghost who had silenced a firing range and brought a SEAL commander to his knees with one perfect shot. Whatever mission awaited them would be conducted not just with tactical precision, but with the ethical clarity that came from understanding that some shots saved lives rather than took them, and some ghosts returned precisely when they were needed most. Have you encountered someone whose quiet expertise changed your understanding of what's possible? Someone who taught through example rather than instruction? Share your story of transformative mentorship below, and subscribe to join us in exploring the profound impact one person's excellence can have on those fortunate enough to witness it.